background, and then some legislative updates got in the way. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Robinson, and then we'll hear from Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Absolutely. Committee Chair, Mack, and esteemed board members, the discussion brought forward to the Policy Committee today focused on incorporating Crown Act language into policies to combat discrimination based on race-based hairstyles. The two policy for revision considerations are our discrimination policy and our dress code policy. The Crown Act stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hairstyles, aiming to extend protections to hair texture and protective styles such as braids, locks, twists, and bantu knots in workplaces and in public schools. Key findings from various studies highlight the urgency and significance of such policies. For example, a substantial percentage of black mothers and teens report experiencing hair discrimination from a young age, impacting educational attendance and self-esteem. Black women's hair is often perceived as unprofessional compared to other women's hair, leading many to alter their hair for job interviews or to fit within workplace norms. Studies also demonstrate a societal bias against natural black hairstyles, affecting professional assessments and opportunities for black women. As of today, we are aware of only one school district in North Carolina that has Crown Act language which is captured in their dress code. Within your materials, we have uploaded the Wake County Non-Discrimination Ordinance, the City of Raleigh Non-Discrimination Ordinance, House Bill 143, Senate Bill 168. We also uploaded the dress code from Door Public Schools, and we uploaded our dress code as well. We provided all that information to help support you in the discussion this afternoon. Dr. Crane and myself are here to take notes and answer any clarifying questions you may have as we look for your guidance on how we are to proceed and move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey, and thank you, Dr. Robinson, Dr. Crane. I personally will say it feels like a long time coming. I had hoped we would take this up when the county and the city did, but nonetheless, we are here. I know that it is not easy for everyone to understand this. Most of you know I personally also wear my hair in different styles, and particularly braids, that many people have seen me in. And while we may not be able to talk through data, which is how we usually base our policy decisions, this one truly is about, and I will use Dr. Martin's words, this is truly about setting policy based on the culture we want to see, not necessarily the data that we have. Oftentimes, especially for black women and also men, in which I'm sure both the superintendent and Mr. Swanson can tell you about a book that all of us read during Read Across America last week. But primarily for black women have often been ostracized, and many of us have normalized changing our hair so that it fits the normative culture in a way that at 49, it took until I was 35 to be okay with not wearing my hair straight to appease other people. No one had to say anything. These are things that are normalized and internalized. And so this policy, very similar to the ways in which, thank you again, Ms. Mahaffey, for picking up the mantle on my dress code, and we finally got that done, was really about creating a culture in our district where we are telling students from a strength-based approach of what we believe and also how we believe in them. And so I want to say that first to debunk the fact that, no, we don't have a list of complaints, but I would also dare to say, as a black mom, students don't go to their principal about things that we've normalized as a culture. We get to hear them at home. We get to hear what people say about their hair being in the way or being problematic. So no, it's not going to be documented by most of our administrators, but I can tell you that there's a whole host of parents like myself who can personally tell you the hardship it costs our kids in our schools. And again, not because people think they're intuitively being mean or rude, but people who talk about their hairs are just as normalized to being okay to call out black people for their hair. And our crown really is our glory. And I now can fully embrace that for myself at this age. So thank you.
Mr. Johnson, is there anything you want to add before we move to discussion?
Yeah, I want to thank Ms. Johnson-Hostler for recommending a great book that I had the opportunity of reading to students, black and brown students at Barwell, which talked about the importance of the haircut. And I think everyone at this table knows on Tuesday is my haircut day. If not, I think staff saw that today on our call executive when I was in the barbershop. But it talked about the importance of your crown and just seeing the little kids, especially little black boys who got to see someone who looked like them and really talk about that experience in the barbershop was amazing. And it was great to kind of, see how labeled as non-compliant or disrespectful. So that data may not necessarily be there, but I'm sure if we were to look and dig, we can see some examples of how, non-compliance means so many different things to so many different folks. And I'll say this, Dr. Taylor, as a former teacher, I don't think I ever wrote up anyone for non-compliance because my definition of non-compliance looks something totally different to everyone else. So I think this is important, it's very important. I think this is also not just one to, I don't think we can, well, I won't say that part, but I'll just say in closing, Madam Chair, that I think this is going to be a great step in the right direction. I think this is also something that can spark conversation, just like a book about a haircut or a barbershop experience allows students to see themselves into a book and start some conversation. And even the young ladies in the classroom that had braids and cornrows, they were able to see themselves in those books as well and to talk about it. So I'm excited about this conversation and thank you for continuing this. Since we've gotten through the difficult part of policy, now we get to really shift the conversation, really be the district that we want to be.
Dr. Taylor, anything you want to add?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. What I can tell you is that everything that Mr. Swanson and Mrs. Johnson-Hosler talked about is relevant. Two things that I can tell you is that the military has been one of the most restrictive areas in terms of compliance, and they have relaxed their hair policy as well. So they've actually gone through a second iteration to where, those natural hairstyles are not pushed the same way. And obviously, I have a daughter who's in law enforcement that has had to deal with the same thing. So I think everything that you do with this policy is going to be in line with what we know is a good equity policy for the district. And I'm glad to see that the board is having this conversation because it is about what is viewed as non-compliance. And this should not be that situation. So Steve is just excited to hear the board have this discussion.
I'm hoping that we can start on the dress code piece of it. I know the only option that we have right now is Durham's. So if you'll pull that up, and it's section A, number 11. And Dr. Robinson, if you want to lead us through that piece on what DPS says and how it would fit into our dress code policy.
Absolutely.
Attachment 6.
Yeah, attachment 6. So 6 DPS 4316.
Thank you for doing
dress code. Thank you, Dr. Crane. I know you've been working on this for a while as well.
So if you look at attachment 6 on the second page, number 11, which has been highlighted, Durham Public Schools policy says that students may dress and style their hair for school in a manner that expresses their individuality and culture, including, for example, locks, braids, Gillis. And then it says, subscript A, certain programs may have more restrictive requirements for hairstyles, including NCHSAA and ROTC programs, which require signatures of students and parents consenting to these restrictions in grooming and dress. So we utilize that language in order to help incorporate what we wanted to propose as a potential revision to our dress code policy. If you could look at that particular attachment, which is attachment 7. And if you go to the second page, the Durham language is in red. Our edits are in blue, in which it says students may dress and style their hair for school in a manner that expresses their individuality and culture, including, but we also want to include in that language, but not limited to, length, braids, locks, twists, tight coils or curls, cornrows, bantu knots, afros, gillis, and head wraps. And then we have included the same language which pertains to the North Carolina High School Athletic Association and ROTC programs as well. And so we would like to propose that for a revision to that policy, but we're more than welcome to any edits or any questions you may have.
And Dr. Crane, would you share why length is important in this dress code? I know we had an issue with a school down east.
Yeah, down east, a male student at a charter school, a Native American student wanted to wear a long braid at his graduation, but was denied the opportunity to do that. Length has also, length it is there because, well, I did have an opportunity to speak with a couple of folks in OEA, and that was a recommendation to add to what was already there.
I know like there's also a concern for like a lot of our Sikh students as well.
Yes. All right, so we've got some hands up. We'll start with Mr. Hershey and then go to Ms. Edmonds.
Just for the edits, do we need to put a J in front of ROTC since all of ours are junior ROTC?
Absolutely.
The other thing is, can we ask, as the point Dr. Taylor made about the military, can we make sure that our JROTC are evaluating their own standards, so it's not just, so we're not giving them an out when it's unnecessary?
Great idea.
Lynn?
I just want to know, do we need a reference for middle school sports, or does that cover it?
The High School Athletic Association.
Because
Yeah.
DPI manages middle school sports, right?
I think so.
I don't know that we do, I'm just asking the question, do we need
I
that?
can research that and come back with an answer.
Okay.
Yeah, because like we have some club sports.
But I think all of that, and it may be that it comes from NFHS for middle school, is where they primarily get it from, I would think, but.
I'll definitely follow up.
Yeah.
I can do
This is
that.
today meant to be more of a discussion, so if we end up not, getting everything tight, we can bring this back. I also want to say we are going to bring this in the opposite for bullying and harassment, and we're going to keep it tight to the Crown Act, but we will bring bullying and harassment in its full form at another policy meeting, so that will be coming as well.
Ms. Mahaffey, for clarification, so the Durham policies, we're not asking the board, the policy committee, to approve these specific policies, right? I think the question is whether we have direction to come back at your next meeting with specific edits to your policies, and we'll take a fresh look and, look at other districts' policies, but also
Thank you
our
for
own
better
legal research.
articulating that for
Thank
me
you.
this week.
And can I add to that, Ms.
Yes.
Mahaffey? Specifically, because I articulate to you and to Mr. Ramey that I do want to see it in our bullying policy because our dress code does not allow this to be applicable to our faculty and staff. And the only way to do that is to put it here because our student dress code will leave them out as a class of people that would be able to.
So that'd be policy 1710, I guess.
Yes, and Mr. Happy's got to bring it back, but I wanted to make, you said that, but I wanted to be clear, the reason why I want you to bring it back is because I do want this to also be applicable to our staff.
I appreciate that explanation too.
Ms. Caulfield?
Thank you for sharing that, because I appreciate it. I would have never thought about it, and when I was reading over this policy, I was wondering, where this originated and where it came from. And I remember when we were seeing, it was at Southeast Raleigh, there was one dancer there that had braids all the way down. I mean, and she was still whipping her hair around. I was like, wow. And it was just amazing. And she did it for a really long time. But I was thinking to myself, she has to sit on her hair all the time, because it's really long. And just being a girl, you're conscious of those things. And I'm wondering, with what you're talking about in ROTC and sports and all this other stuff, when we're allowing them to do that, which I agree, we should, do we ever run the risk of a safety issue where they could get hurt? I mean, your shoelaces could get caught in an
I
escalator.
can speak to this now. When
Okay.
it comes to sports, they're looking for metal, like something to control the hair that you cannot wear in like soccer or something like that. But it's never come up with like a hairstyle in any of this football, wrestling, anything like that. It's sometimes you have to wear a hair cover in wrestling, but that has been normal for.
So that's already
forever.
part of the
And
dress
that's
code
not,
for sports.
and that's not a particular. It's. You got a bunch of kids that like to wear their, given
Yeah.
hairstyle. So that's that thing. But it's never been about a hairstyle not being allowed in a sport. It's always like if there's a metal something that can cause an injury on something. And even then, officials are not going to go through somebody's hair and look for it. if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, oh, I was thinking about a girl getting her hair stuck or
No, that's part of
somebody
the-
stepping
that-
on her and it getting
My daughter
hurt.
dances and cheered with her
Yeah.
braids that long.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's just part of the risk.
Now, if she was stunting, she put it up herself, right? Like,
Yeah.
so there's, I mean, I think the thing I said to Mr. Ramey is, these are questions we ask if white women wear their hair very long.
Right.
Right, because we expect them to manage their hair to be appropriate for what they're doing, and I think I'm asking for the same respect for black women who wear, or black girls who wear long braids, because that is a thing, right? The first time I saw those long braids on my own daughter, which I was sharing, it took her to 18 to be okay with not having her hair straight, because of the way she knew people would make assumptions about who she was as a black girl. 18, that's how long it took her to be okay with wearing her hair not straight, which is not her natural straight of hair. But, and I asked the same question, I was like, what are you going to do with those braids? And she was like, I mean, I can figure that out. Like, and she was right? Like, that was a fair check on me as a parent to say, you might be normalized, but I'm going to be unapologetic with myself. And when she stunted, she wrapped it up, and when she wasn't stunted, it was down. And so I think that, yes, we have expectations, and I'm glad you brought it up because it allows us to actually say this out loud for our athletics or arts where they also can have appropriate language, because I'm not saying in any state of your hair is it appropriate to cause a safety risk. I am saying that the line is already been blurred, so most people don't, and I say this, and I'm saying to you, I'm a black woman, and I still ask my daughter the same question, because we're all normalized, at our age, we're all normalized the same, because we're all raised in American culture. And so I'm saying that we have to have these conversations so that educators and coaches and theater directors and dance teachers can know how to appropriately have that conversation about safety. And it is an expectation because you can say it without being discriminatory, and I think we can't have that conversation without asking questions like that. So I'm glad you put the question on the table, because it is a conversation that is worth
I
having.
mean, it could be anything.
Absolutely.
I mean, I could have my hair super long, I'm taking a shop class, and that's why I was just looking at the verbiage
Yep, I
saying,
agree.
we don't have anything that talks about safety. You know, the same thing with loose clothing, like if you're in shop class, you would imagine that you'd go over these safety rules and, you know what you have to do, but I wouldn't have even thought of the length of my hair until we started having this conversation to say, I don't even know if that is language.
I know in the dress code, well, first of all, I remember having the conversation of must wear shoes.
Yes, so do I.
And that was going to be another part, because our
Yeah.
kids all wear slippers these days, and I think it's kind of unsafe.
But I do remember there being a part about, us in Part E, clothing must be suitable for all scheduled classroom activities, including PE, science labs, wood shops, and other activities or unique hazards that exist. I think instinctively, I assume as a parent that also goes for my child's hair. Like if they're taking a shop class, wear a ponytail, and I think, you know, I don't know. Yeah.
And by the way, just as part of the sports thing, think about it as jewelry. Like, that's what any sports rules are really related around. Like, if you have long earrings, you're not supposed to in certain sports.
Right.
But
You would think that you would take that off, because you don't want to pull your ear,
Well,
but you might not know,
a
might
lot of
not
athletes
realize,
do
right?
not.
And so, I think what this gets to is that safety will always be a concern
That's right.
regardless, but this is saying that you don't automatically preclude that a hairstyle eliminates a person already before there's even been any discussion. That's kind of been the historical aspect of what students have had to deal with. So the safety issue will always be there, but this just doesn't automatically say hairstyle, boom, double cap. So.
Right, yeah.
Am I, Mr. Swanson? No? Okay. Oh, I was going to say, am I getting the right temperature check that we're all good with this going forward? As far as including this and, as Ms. Johnson-Hodger said, creating a culture of acceptance with our dress code?
100%.
I just want to make sure that, I guess the question I'm trying to raise here is how will we make sure that our teachers and staff are trained on making sure that the language, that there's a common set of language, and that, again, that we are I guess, how do we make sure our teachers are trained in this? I'm not going to try to oversimplify.
I mean, it's a conversation that we've got to have, because that's always the part that's toughest to police. That we put a policy in place, but when Robert Taylor's in his individual classroom, we haven't had a discussion about policy changes ahead of time, then that won't circumscribe any conversation that I have. So that will definitely be a part of what we'll have to do, talking with principals who are going to be responsible for talking with their staff. But I think you're 100% right. It's about how it gets down to the individual classroom. And we know that it has to be conversations that principals will have with their faculty and staff when we roll out changes in the policy.
Dr. Robinson and Dr. Crane, I think you have some direction moving forward, and I think I hear that there's a desire to see this as a part of the bullying, harassment, or discrimination policy so that our employees can have the same protections.
And that is correct. If you look at the Board Policy 1710, 4021, 7230, Prohibition Against Discrimination, Harassment, and Bullying, that's Attachment 5. You'll notice in the prohibited behaviors under discrimination number 1, we truly wanted to add the language, race and ethnicity, included traits historically associated with race or national origin, including but not limited to hair texture, hair type, or protective hairstyle. Proactive hairstyles include such hairstyles as braids, locks, twists, tight coils or curls, cornrows, bang-two knots, afros, and head wraps. And so that is the language that we would want to include in that particular policy under discrimination as far as prohibited behaviors.
Mr. Swanson?
I would just like to see, instead of just saying locks, we may know what locks are, but I think it's spelled now as dreadlocks.
Okay.
So therefore, it's just that common language that we are developing.
Further discussion, board members? Dr. Ng?
I like the language of it. I'm just kind of playing a devil's advocate in some ways. What if some teen who is not African American chooses to, have a hair in a certain way? I mean, I know some people, it's like imitate. Was it?
Yes, our culture is often imitated.
Right, it's the best form of flattery,
Yes.
right? But at the same time, like, some people may not look at it that way.
Yes, that's it.
And then that person may get, just made fun of, whatever, potential. I mean, I'm just kind of...
Oh, no, we played this one out, too.
Yes, we did.
I think for me, it's a conversation starter. Very similar to how the students were in the book, is you educate folks on the issues. Without calling folks out, you call folks in. And explain how, to some, that may be offensive. But I think this notion of, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I'm just saying this cancel culture, I don't think that's an appropriate fit for this. I think this is an opportunity to really just educate folks, calling folks in on these issues and starting the conversation. And I think our students are really equipped and are able to articulate their concerns much better than sometimes we do as adults. And they're able to lay it out and move forward on it. But I think that's a piece that we leave to our students to handle that the best way that they know how to.
And I do think it'll be important to the first question Tyler, Mr. Swanson asked Dr. Taylor is, it is the adults I worry about the most in handling these conversations. It really isn't our young people, right? Like, so if I tease that person, Tyler can totally gut check me and be like, hey, that's not how we talk about that. What I see with discrimination, especially with hair discrimination, is our adults don't know what to do with it. And then their response is both of you are in trouble, right? Which isn't really doing what I hope to do, which is change the culture of how we talk about our Black culture. Again, it is not lost on me that we are having this conversation because Black culture is the only culture that people never talk about. Because we're American, so people just pretend we don't have a culture. And so you're right. I think that is going to happen. Ms. Happy and I talked about this. It already does happen. Some of those kids are accepted for their hair because that's the culture that they are leaning into, which again, we don't call it for what it is, but it's Black culture. And then there are others that will could potentially be doing it mockingly, and those are the places where our adults, especially our administrators and APs who deal with discipline, have to know how to intervene and have that conversation. Because these are also things I don't think are suspension worthy. We lose the opportunity to teach our kids.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would do it as a mockingly.
Oh, they will.
I mean, I think it's like, how another party perceives it, that,
I think both are true.
yeah.
I think somebody will do it mockingly as soon as we pass this policy. And I also think someone else will respond in a way, to your point, that could be harmful without us having the context for conversation.
Dr. Taylor?
So I do want to go back, Mrs. Swanson, and I do think it is about how we have to be intentional about training when it comes to all of these issues, even beyond hairstyles.
Our dress code.
Yeah, and so I met with an Islamic group, and they talked about how the teacher asked a child about the hijab, and I would have thought that
We'd be past that?
I thought we'd be past that. And so I think there's going to be the specific piece that we've got to have specific conversations with staff about how you even have these kinds of discussions, the kinds of things that you should and should not do. And sometimes it is about wanting to know, but even wanting to know, you have to be particular about how you ask that question. And so I just wanted to lift that up to know that, say that we're going to have to do something specific when I think about how this conversation is going.
And it's up to us to set that standard. I mean, Ms. Johnson-Hostler will remember when we updated the dress code, we had one news organization that was like, will bikinis be allowed in Wake County Public Schools? And I haven't seen a student wearing their, now I'm probably putting that out there and it's going to happen tomorrow.
Just like somebody will have locks and a bikini on tomorrow.
Right, dreadlocks and a bikini. But I mean, like, that's not the culture of coming to school. So I think it's also like how we set the tone and our administrators and this district sets that tone. But like, if you're going to report and be like, if that's going to be the headline, then really? Yeah, let's not, but sure, if you need to ask that question, go ahead. But we're not wearing swimsuits to school.
And I appreciate
Yeah.
this being brought up, because, I mean, it is, before I read this, I didn't know what the Crown Act was, and I did not know what a bandu.
Bantu nuts.
So, I appreciate that ability to help me understand some of those things that I would never have experienced in my entire life. Right.
Question. Does this need to include then any kind of religious, I mean, we're spelling out race and ethnicity in there, but does it need to include a religious,
So we talked about that in our dress code, and Ms. Mahaffey can definitely probably take us back to this. So when you said that, my immediate thought was, we talked about hijabs during dress code. So,
About a hijab, though.
yeah.
And it's literally
And
in our
it's
dress code.
literally in the dress code policy.
But to the point that as it applies to staff, would we want it in the anti-discrimination language, so it's not just head coverings for students, but also staff?
I don't remember what's there, so yes. I mean, I can't answer, the answer would be yes if it's not there, but this is a long conversation we have had multiple times.
Okay.
Dr.
Thank you.
Robinson?
But it speaks to.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I definitely wanted to share. I know that Board Member Johnson-Hostler continually talked about how to make sure that the Crown Act was integrated into policies that impact employees, what that looks like. I just wanted to make sure everybody is aware we do have a policy, 2304, that talks about employee dress, and that's going to be coming back to the board as well. And based upon our conversation, we definitely want to make sure that we create some language that can be integrated into that policy for the board to consider. So that will be addressed.
And along the lines of religious head coverings, I noticed our dress code language talks about length, but our discrimination does not specifically call that out. So I don't know if we want to add that or we feel that that's appropriate. I'll leave that up to you and Dr. Crane.
Absolutely. We can make sure that the language, and I believe Board Member Swanson said they wanted to make sure that it was coherent on both sides, so there wasn't any misunderstanding. So we can make sure that language is more tightly parallel.
Is there anything else on the topic of the Crown Act, either of these two policies, before we move forward? Or do we feel like we've captured what we're looking for to to come back to us. Ms. Caulfield?
This isn't a question about the Crown Act. I think we should move forward with that. But while we're on the policy and we're making a change, if there's something else that's on there, is that something that has to be addressed at another?
Yeah, so we're going to bring, this was just to get this specific language going, because we do have more of the migration, but the idea was that we would bring it back and then discuss things further. But if you want to email Dr. Robinson your suggestion,
Okay.
we can certainly make that a part of our next discussion as
It
we're
was
looking
separate
at
from this
this.
subject, but it had something to do with one of the items and then something else. that
Sounds
was-
good.
Yeah.
I look forward to your email.
Okay.
Just one final note
Yes.
on the Crown Act, since we've been talking about the Crown Act, just wanted everyone to be aware, there is no North Carolina Crown Act, there's no federal legislation. There are 2 bills pending in the General Assembly, they both seem to be crawling at a pretty slow pace. So if those bills were further along, I might suggest that you all hold off a little bit on this and see what the General Assembly does, make sure your policies align with statute, if the statute's going to pass. But again, I've been monitoring these bills, they don't seem to be moving very quickly, they're in first referral to committee. So I think it's appropriate for you to...
Because we know where that...
I can't remember which one, but there's not been much activity. So with that, if you want to get ahead, that's fine. I just flagging that you may need to come back and revise your policies to align with the statute if it passes at some point in the future.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler, do you know when the county and the city of Raleigh passed their ordinances?
Oh, theirs is at least 2, yeah, I literally, it's like 2 years ago.
Okay.
It's funny because I actually thought y'all had done this, the previous board.
We tried.
We tried.
2021, and both were 2021. City of Raleigh, July 2021, and Wake County, October 2021.
Yeah, they brought them together.
Well, thank you, Dr. Green and Dr. Robinson. We look forward to seeing those edits when we come back. Maybe we'll try to bring the employee dress policy around the same time so we can do it all and look at it all together. And we'll also maybe add time so that we can look at the broader bullying and harassment policy in its totality at that time as well.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Thank you.
both very much. All right, we're going to switch over to our migration and move along to personnel and all of those leave policies that Ms. Hill told us about for the next 85 minutes or so.
I've been waiting all day for this. Thank you, Dr. Green.
You're on a roll today, Dr.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
We do want to, and Dr. Robinson mentioned this, but we do plan to bring to you the policy for employee dress and appearance as a part of the migration, and we can move that up earlier to coordinate with the other policy that's being brought forward.
Does that work? I didn't realize that was, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's policy 7340, but to the extent that you all want to move all those policies together, we can do that and work on that policy and make sure that it reflects the same information. But we did want you all to know that we did take a look at it, given this conversation, and we will get it ready for you.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Hill. I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad you were here today to hear that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, in the interim, we have leave policies for you guys to look at, and as you may remember from our last meeting, we talked about the significant difference here versus the School Boards Association policies, that we were breaking out our leave policies to hopefully be more useful and accessible to our employees. And so today we come to you with 5 policies for us to consider for the manual. For the most part, these policies reflect information that is in the State Board manual or in our board policy 2280/3800/4800. Occasionally also reflected information that may be in our handbook that we use to help guide our employees into regarding their policies. The first policy is policy 7511, which is annual vacation leave. This policy summarizes parts of the DPI manual and our board policy 3800. Once adopted, it would replace sections of policy, I'll just reference this at 3800. Section of policy 3800, section 3.1, annual leave, 3.2, annual leave for catastrophic illness, and 3.4, locally earned annual leave. We've basically taken the policy to set out some information that we thought would be helpful for employees to have as they look at the annual leave policies. So we've included in here the rate of earning for annual leave, what our process will be for the approval of leave. There is a section on restrictions on annual leave for instructional personnel because that's very specific in terms of when instructional personnel who require substitutes are able to use annual leave. So we wanted to make sure they understood those restrictions and they were laid out there. In that restrictive section, we've included some exceptions that are in DPI manual or in state statute. One deals with instructional personnel who work in year-round schools who are 11 or 12-month employees. That they can take annual leave on days that students are in attendance with prior approval of the principal. And then there's a provision dealing with career and technical education teachers who, they may take annual leave on days during the 11th or 12th month of their employment. And that's just another exception that's been carved out specifically for that group of teachers. Then we just laid out some more of those restrictions that are out of the DPI manual or that are highlighted in our policies, laying out the 10 and 11th month employees. Their first 10 days of annual leave are laid out in the calendar. The opportunity to use annual leave in lieu of sick leave, how annual leave can be used for short-term disability, the process for interim or temporary or part-time employees, and the use of annual leave by those folks, summer employment, and making it clear that people who earn annual leave are able to use that during summer employment. We also talk about military caregivers and wanted to just pinpoint that information so that people know they can use their annual leave to assist and care for injured military family members. This section about annual leave not being able to extend the term of employment, something that the state provided in the 2000s, but we still have employees who have earned bonus vacation leave that they still have on the books. And so we have reflected that in here. And then this is local provision specifically to Wake County, where locally earned annual leave for certain administrators can be earned and used as an additional type of annual leave when people are coming from outside of North Carolina or from a comparable field and they're in one of our administrative type positions. Very quick overview, but just to, again, these are sections that have been there, have been in policy. We're just trying to pull them together for the most part and lay them out in a way that our employees can clearly see and understand.
Well, seeing that this one alone is 4 pages, I appreciate you splitting these all up and not cramming them together. Are there questions or comments from board members on the annual vacation leave policy? Ms.
I just have an inquiry about the annual leave, just the process. So when they come to us, they ask for approval for the annual leave, right? That would be, and then they would provide a purpose of what the reason is, and it's like a certain time frame. Is that how that works?
So generally, an employee will, and I just brought a sample of it, but it's on, we have a leave form that we fill out. It includes annual leave, sick leave, the different type of leaves available. An employee would fill out the leave form, put the number of days that they're requesting annual leave and the dates that they're requesting it, and then provide that to the supervisor. For annual leave, you don't have to give a reason that you're taking a leave. It's vacation leave, and the state calls it annual vacation leave. And so you don't have to tell why you're taking it or where you're going or give a note for it. It really is kind of your discretion in terms of how you're using that leave, as long as your supervisor approves use of that time period for your leave. There are some other types of leave, and we'll talk about them momentarily, where you do have to give a reason or you have to provide documentation for that leave, but this one is not one of those.
Okay, so this is not like leave of absence, that's something separate.
It's interesting, because the first time I ever read policies about leave versus annual leave, I was like, is it's a leave of absence, it's a leave of absence, it's, what do you call it, annual leave? But this is, it's not an extended leave of absence. It is, you go on vacation for a week, maybe a vacation for 2 weeks, that sort of thing. It depends on how much leave you have available, dictates how much leave you're going to be taking, essentially. And so it's not like an extended leave of absence. We earn annual vacation leave. There's we didn't put the chart in here, but there's a chart in the DPI manual that shows how much leave you earn based upon the years that you've been employed. And it increases after maybe 5 years or so. You get another level and then another level. And so you accrue that leave each year. We also, as you saw, we have some built-in leave, annual leave days that are built into the calendar for our instructional personnel, where it lays out their first 10 days of annual leave, how they will take those days. It's built into their employee calendar. And then any leave they have earned beyond that, they're able to take that leave, for example, on a work day or something like that where students are not in session.
Okay. So this is just more earned time?
Yeah,
Yes,
and so
it's
what
earned
you're
leave.
referring to is when a person asks for an approved leave of absence,
Yeah.
and that will come to the board, that means they want to be separated for some period of time,
Right.
3 months, 6 months, a year, however long we approve it for. But this is just earned leave that they have, so that's the difference that you're referring to.
Okay.
That comes to the board.
Just wanted to make sure I understood it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
There's only like 500 more examples of leave that we're going to be going through today. All right, any other questions on annual vacation leave?
Motion to move to first reading.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Hershey to move this to first reading and a second from Chair Haggerty. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? On to sick leave.
Thank you. And thank you for the question on this, because it is a little confusing sometimes. There's so many different, as you'll see, so many different types of leave. So please let me know if you have any questions about anything we're going through. Our sick leave policy, again, similar to the way that we've laid out the provisions in the annual leave section. We've done the same here for the sick leave section. To the extent that the sick leave policy is approved, it will replace in policy 3800, section 4.1 on sick leave and section 4.2 on extended sick leave. This policy lays out, again, as all of these policies do, they reference the DPI manual, just to make it clear. That's sort of our overarching document that we use here. It lays out the purposes for which sick leave can be used. You'll see information in here about pregnancy, recuperation from childbirth, adoption, short-term disability, supplementing workers' comp payments, death in the family, and again, military care. I will mention in here that we don't have a detailed reference regarding parental leave because we're going to pull that separately. Sick leave can be used for those purposes, but we're going to pull parental leave as a separate policy. As you all know, that's something that the state is working on, paid parental leave. We're waiting for some potential regulations to come out for that, and whether we're going to go ahead and bring the policy prior to the regulations, because it may be the fall, but we're pulling all of that information together, so that's why you won't see that here very much. We included in here some of the procedures for reporting absences, and unlike annual leave, with sick leave, it is something where we request that if someone, has a scheduled appointment or anticipated absence for sick leave, that they go ahead and try to request that leave as far in advance as possible so that planning can be made, so that someone can take over that employee's responsibilities. And that if someone is going to be out for sick leave for more than 10 days, we want that person to look at the Family Medical Leave Act, because that will trigger some protections potentially for that employee. But we also recognize that employees may be absent for unforeseeable issues related to sick leave. And so this also talks about when an employee can't give advance notice, that they're supposed to give and apply for that sick leave and use that sick leave as soon as they come back, so that that notice is provided to the supervisor. We also have information in here about making sure that our HR leaves team is notified, because, again, we have FMLA obligations that are triggered when people are absent. for a time period, so we need to make sure we're on top of our responsibilities, as well as the employee knowing what their rights are under the Family Medical Leave Act. There is information in here about verifying the need for sick leave. So consistent with our existing policy, if someone is absent for more than 3 days, and the supervisor may request a medical statement with regard to that employee's absence. In other contexts, there need to be approval for requesting medical statement. When we do make it clear in here that employees don't have to present their medical information to their supervisor. So that information can go directly to Human Resources. Although they'll give their leave form to their supervisor, the medical documentation, we want to make sure employees understand that they can be protected in the confidentiality related to their specific medical needs. So that is laid out here as something that we've had in the handbook, but we've also laid it out here in policy for employees to understand. Extended sick leave is something that's provided just to those teachers and media coordinators who require a substitute. They're able to earn or to use extended sick leave when they run out of their other leave. It does require a deduction for a substitute, but it is 20 days that are earned each year by our teachers, and media coordinators who require substitutes are able to use extended sick leave. And that's something where they earn the 20 days each year. It doesn't carry over into the next year. They get 20 more days the following year. So again, this is just lay out some of these provisions so our employees understand. I'm always referencing it back. One of the things you'll notice with these leave policies is that we've tried to put in here what section of the DPI manual is related to this, so that employees also know where to go to if they want more information, because that manual is so much longer than what these policies are.
Mr. Swanson?
Yes, that sick leave and all that leave just brought back some unrelated stress that I do not miss, especially when you leave and have to get those signed, those forms back in at certain days. So I want to know, is there any RFPs that may need to go with this, especially, I can only speak at the high school level, because, and I'm sure certain lead secretaries do things differently. So I just want to make sure there's some consistency. And so,
So
yeah.
I will tell you that we do training with our leave secretaries related to leave processes. That is something that HR puts into place, and we're actually, we normally do training at the Clerical Institute that happens in the summer, and we actually are doing some training for leave secretaries at for HR issues that we're putting together starting April 2nd, and we'll be doing it, I think, the first Tuesday of every month, where we'll be going through leave processes, we'll be going through substitute processes, things that we believe new and existing leave secretaries might just need to have, and they can pop in for the subject matters that they want to pop in on. And we are really excited about putting that information together. So I'm not sure that we will need regulations, but I do think training is always important to make sure that consistency that you're talking about. And we as an HR team recognize that. And again, we're starting that training to get it out there to make sure. We have so many new leave secretaries. I think, the turnover has been huge recently. And so we want to make sure that we get that information out there for them to have access to it. And every month, if you want a refresher, you jump in for a refresher on which section that you want, but we'll be putting that information out there on an ongoing basis moving forward.
Do you think there should be some set time frame of saying, instead of having folks pop in and out, should there be a set number of required, I don't want to use the term required, but continued education on these pieces?
It's not something that I personally considered. It's certainly, and I don't have my finger or pulse on how the leave secretaries handle their training. I don't know that there are continuing requirements, but I do know that they very much participate in the Clerical Institute that happens every year. It's happening in August for this coming year, and there are multiple departments across the district that provide training for them at the Clerical Institute. And then, just like HR is doing the training that we're starting monthly basis, there are also other departments that also do that monthly training. So I don't know about any requirements there, but I know we're working to get opportunities there.
So, Mr. Swanson, and I know what you're talking about in terms of consistency, and so one of the things that we will always make sure is that people follow the manual, but in that manual, it can create inconsistency. So if you look at verification of the need for sick leave, is that 4.1.3 the DPI manual, and it says unless waived by the employee's supervisor. And so that means that if you're out 4 days, Kyle, just do your thing, we'll see you in 4 days. Some schools may say, telling you up front, if you have some more than 3 days, you will bring a doctor's note. And so that does create consistency. Both are interpreting it and using it as the manual says, but those are one of the things that we can definitely talk about in training in terms of how that comes out.
That works. I'll say my thoughts publicly. I'll talk to y'all.
And I think Dr. Timo has some comments as well.
No, I was just going to add to Mr. Swanson's question. We kind of thought about the same thing in HR. And so a couple months ago, we revamped our leave website. So we now have leave procedures for a work site. It's another 15-page document with hyperlinks, but it is geared toward the lead secretaries mostly who are processing this. And another thing we've started doing is monthly adding reminders in our HR bulletins where we're seeing some common errors, just reminder of some things to highlight. So I think we're thinking along the lines of how do we train folks and continually provide written resources to secretaries out there that are doing it.
I think that, and I'm not accusing anyone of doing this, I'm just saying hypothetically, if, you have a lead secretary that's very close to one teacher that may or may not let that teacher get their documents in the guidelines or that time frame, and another teacher does, and that's the piece that is a little, that I'm concerned that may slip through the cracks.
Human behavior.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
I think the more training that we do, the more information that we put out there. If AJ said, with folks flagging where there are concerns and making sure people understand what we need to do, I think we will get there to get people similarly aligned. It's not going to be the exact same way everywhere all the time because there is some flexibility in the policy that's built in. But I think as long as we emphasize to people, and maybe one of the things we can start emphasizing is, you need to be consistent with how you treat the employees in your school. That's kind of a basic thing. It's an assumption, I think, that we make a lot, that everybody's going to treat people consistently, but it's always a good reminder, right? Let's be consistent with how we're treating our employees and making sure, across the board, the standards that we hold for one are the standards that we hold for all. So that's always something that we can repeat and continue to, and we'll make a note to have that in our HR training as we move forward, that people work on being consistent and treating all employees similarly with leave and other processes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just having flashbacks to filling out those forms. Dr. Ng?
No, I'm having flashbacks of filling them out. Because, I'm always on the receiving end of, people submitting FMLA forms for me to fill out. But just a curious question, what's the timeline of, once somebody submits a FMLA, what's the timeline of, getting the feedback and things like that?
The FMLA approval. And let me just say, we will be bringing the FMLA policy to the School Boards Association. Has a drafted policy, and we will use that as the basis for our FMLA policy review that we bring to you all. We didn't bring it with this section, but I think it's anticipated for the next section.
It's future trauma-free.
Sorry, we can't take your trauma and put it into just one day. Off the top of my head, I don't know the turnaround times because I don't work directly with the FMLA leave, but we do, once an employee submits information, the FMLA team has to determine whether that employee is eligible for FMLA. They have to look at how many hours that employee has worked and how long they've been working with the school district to first determine if they're eligible for FMLA. And then they have to look at the documentation that the employee provides to determine if it's an FMLA, covered reason, and if it's not for the employee but for a family member, is it a covered family member? So they do have to go through a process of making sure the information is gathered, making sure they've received back that actual form from the medical professional explaining how long the person is anticipated to be out on FMLA. And what we always try to explain to people is that FMLA is like a job protection rather than a paid leave. Right? It's protecting your job over that 12-week time period that you have that leave. And employees are able to run their paid leave along with the non-paid FMLA. So our leave team, our HR leave team, looks at that employee's leave balances and what the employee wants to do with their leave and tries to create a calendar. They do, not even try, they create a calendar to show, hey, she's going to be using sick leave for the first, 20 days. And then if she runs out of that sick leave, she's going to use extended sick leave if that's available. And they lay all of that out so that the employee understands when they receive their calendar information, here are the days that you're covered by FMLA and you're going to have paid leave and benefits. Here are the days that you're covered by FMLA. You'll still have benefits, but you no longer have paid leave. And then if the employee's leave goes longer, here are the days where you're outside of your FMLA protection, but, and you're going to be non-paid. So the employee clearly understands what what they're receiving when they put in for that leave time. It's quite a process that our leave team follows to make sure that our employees understand what's happening with their leave and that we're providing them the rights that they have with regard to their family medical leave. We'll talk about it more when we bring the policy.
I appreciate that. I know when people are in that situation, it's nice to have somebody on the other side that can help lead them through that kind of confusing mess.
Absolutely. So we have our leave processors in our HR talent acquisition side of our department, and then we also, when there are complicated family medical leave matters, we have someone on my team who helps walk employees through some of those more complicated matters.
I'm going back to section C and not to prolong Mr. Swanson's concerns with verification for sick leave. I mean, if you have a cold, being sick for 3 days is, sometimes you're just there and sometimes the doctor won't even see you unless you've had a virus and a cold for 5 days. And so I don't have an answer, but what I'm hearing, Superintendent Taylor, is there's some flexibility in that piece from DPI, so maybe that's something. I mean, I know what it's like to also have to do sub-plans for 5 days, and I don't want to be out for 5 days and write sub-plans. But if I'm sick for 5 days, there's probably a good reason. So my question is really again, I don't have the answer, but is that something where we want to look at that flexibility? Because sometimes going to the doctor just to be seen to get a note is, one more thing to make it difficult, especially if you have a sick kid that you're taking care of at home, or you're sick on the couch.
And a copay.
And a copay, right.
And I mean, the board can certainly look at the number of days. I think that flexibility is there. But I also know that as a principal, sometimes you look at, Howard's always out. And so I have to get him to bring in a doctor's note, but Sam is hardly ever out. And so if you wanted to say 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, you can do that. But unless you all are hearing something different, principals will usually use that flexibility. But we said we got to make sure anybody who's involved in that creates consistency among everybody. Not saying that I'm nice with you, but I'm going to treat you differently. But you can codify it if you want to.
Well, right, or, I work at this school, my principal requires, regardless of who you are, 3 days, you need that note, whereas my friend that works at this school never needs a note. So.
What's that?
Teachers do talk.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is, and I can tell you that is the biggest problem, that I can tell you that you can increase the time, but anybody who sticks to that, if they read it in the letter of the law, that's going to be reflected when teachers talk. And so
That's what I'm thinking of. If somebody is, we're going to do this 3 days because I'm not going to be seen as, well, you're favoring this person over this person. I guess my gut instinct is really, I'd like to see it added, even if we just add a day, knowing that I personally, don't want to write subplans for that many days. Maybe that's just me, but I don't know.
So, I mean, I would certainly say,
But that's,
kind of give us
I'm going to
direction
open
on
that
what
up,
you're
and I see
thinking.
Ms. Hill.
So I will say this, the 3 days comes from our local policy, it's not a DPI. So it is
Okay.
something that we have in Wake County policy that we can obviously change. My experience is that most people know the 3 days and use the 3 days, and I don't get a lot of questions about the 3 days being kind of the standard. I get a question if someone wants to do less than 3 days, and that sometimes comes up if, there is a pattern of being absent every Friday, or, something like that. That's where that comes up. But generally, at least in my experience, and I certainly will ask AJ to jump in if he has other information, but my experience is that people seem to know and understand the 3 days from both the supervisor side and the employee side. If they're well aware of it, and if you deviate from that, then that's where the questions come, from what I can tell.
Former principal, what say you?
Yeah, I think that 3 days is kind of standard, but I also think there might be some value, whether we do it in policy or not, to communicate to supervisors that if somebody's has had a fever or something for the past 4 days, we don't need you to go get a doctor's note. I think sometimes the way we have it written, unless waived by a supervisor, they think, oh, I really do have to get a note, if it's 3 days versus 4 or 5. Yeah, they do, and then principals try to do the same. So it may be worthwhile, at least in communication, to say that you do have some discretion if you have pretty good information that this person's just really sick and they're going to be sick for 4 days instead of 3, not to require them to go to a doctor.
I'm surprised we didn't do that with COVID since we did it with students.
Seeing no further discussion, so is there a motion to approve this and send it to
So moved.
first reading? All right. We have a motion from Chair Haggerty and a second from Mr. Swanson. And we will move on to personal leave.
Do we have a vote?
Oh,
Oh, no.
Motion and a second.
Everyone, thank you.
We skipped one
Thank you,
somewhat
Attorney Ramey.
important part of the
Appreciate you
process.
being here.
Pass 2-0.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay.
Thank you.
Feels like I gotta put that in my notes.
All right.
Ooh, I know I forgot.
Now we're going to move on to personal leave.
All right, so the next policy is personal leave. This is one of those policies that is, again, a new policy that we're adding. We actually don't have a policy on this in our policy 3800. We didn't speak to this, but it's in the DPI manual, and it's something that we speak to in the handbook. And so we're laying out here in policy just to make it clear. This is another of those policies where it's specific to those classroom teachers and school media coordinators who require substitutes, and they basically are able to earn personal leave and use that personal leave. There have been some recent updates to the use of personal leave, whereas if someone requires personal leave, and as long as they give the reason for personal leave, there is not a substitute deduction. It's, I think, a new law that came into play last year, I believe. And so we updated our leave form so people can tell why they're using personal leave. And this is one where if they say why they're requesting it, and there doesn't have to be a whole lot of details.
Can they just write, it's personal?
I think it has to be a little more than that. But if they say why they're requesting it, then there is no salary deduction for a substitute if they do that. Again, that's just how the new law was written, and so we've given our teachers that opportunity to be able to lay that information out when they're using personal leave. There are some limitations to the use of personal leave, like the first day of school or right before a holiday, things like that, unless the principal gives permission. And for those people who move out of a position where they earn personal leave, they can no longer use that personal leave. If they go back into that position, then they can. So Ms. Batowski here, former 8th grade teacher, has personal leave still on the books, but will not be using it while she's in this position. And hopefully never, because we're not letting her go back. So, but that is there.
What did you teach, though?
8th grade English.
We might need her back.
Nope, she cannot go back.
I just saw somebody in the line
She's leaving you
yesterday. I was like, please come back to teaching.
Nope, she cannot go back. And then this also just talks about the salary deduction that's required and when people have to have a deduction and when they're reimbursed if there's not a substitute that actually covers for the teacher. So again, just kind of laying out that information here. I would, in section A here, I just realized that we wrote in school media specialist in that first line of section A, and we've tried to change that to coordinators, because that's my understanding of the language that's used now. So with your permission, if we could change that from school media specialist to school media coordinators, that would just be something I'd request.
Are there any questions on personal leave?
Motion to move.
Second.
I just want to, we have a motion from Mr. Hershey and a second from Chair Haggerty. Is it still $50 for a substitute?
Yes, that's still the substitute deduction.
Yeah.
But thank you, I always like for us to put that on the record, because the public generally does not know.
Then the teacher has to pay for it, correct?
Yes, so,
But remember, now that they have changed it, that if a teacher puts a reason, any reason, they're not charged the deduction. So that
Except on restricted days.
Right, except on restricted days, sorry.
Right.
So that was like a 90% positive change. It would have been really nice if they just would have given it to them without requiring them to state the reason. But I think most folks, we really tried to communicate that. Anything other than it's personal, we're pretty much accepting, right? An appointment, a trip, like we don't need details.
Right.
And that's able to be approved so that they're not charged the deduction.
It's good, because I can't tell you how many times I got deducted $50, but
Right.
sometimes mental health days are worth it.
That's right.
They were.
I do wonder if it's worth a future budget discussion of what it would cost to cover one of those days, and if we're legally allowed to cover one of those days if a reason is not given. Just because I think if you're teaching and then to have $50 deducted from your pay because you didn't fill out a form correctly or didn't give a good enough reason, I guess it's personal is not good for, but just something to look at for the future, because I know that that is a difficult thing for a lot of our teachers as they're weighing whether or not to take some days off.
and again, I will note that our leave request form was updated to, you put the date requested and the reason right under there. So we've made it easy, and we have, as Dr. Matillo said, we've communicated. Just put your reason. You don't need details. You don't need any of that information. If it's sick, it's sick. Mental health or whatever, that's still sick. So you don't have to give details. You don't have to attach documentation. You just put the reason, and it's right there that you can write it on the form, just like when you're requesting the pay.
I just wanted to second what you said. I would hate to see a teacher, not filling out forms, especially if you're going through something that you just don't want to state and paperwork was not on your mind to be docked. I mean, if everything was in its prime situation and condition, you wouldn't be taking that day. So if there was a way to legally, financially figure it out, I agree with that.
So AJ, could you share who pays the cost when they do fill out the form where there's not a deduction from them? The sub still has to be paid. Does the district incur that cost?
Yeah, we would take that out of district sub-funds, and all of our sub-funds, unless it's for a grant or something, are local funds.
So if they give a reason, it comes out of district funds?
The substitute would, yes.
Okay.
So
Is
that
that paid
means,
by the state or local dollars?
That is local dollars.
Okay.
I think now you're getting into Terry Kimsey magic, but
No,
from
no,
what I
no,
understand,
no, that's all, that is.
we know that, yeah.
The end of my questioning on
yeah,
that.
all of our substitute funds
Okay.
generally for sick leave are local. We use
Okay.
local funds for that.
All right, thank you. All right, further questions? Mr. Hershey?
No, I was gonna remind
Your
you.
motion still stands? All right, seeing that there are no further questions or comments, we still have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, thank you. Civic responsibility leave.
So the next policy, 16, civic responsibility. I will tell you that in the State Board, the BPI manual, they call it civil responsibility, but we thought it probably was meant to be civic responsibility, so we changed it.
Agreed.
So this is one where, again, there's language in the DPI manual as well as language in our policy 3800. The first section, A, dealing with community responsibility leave, the DPI manual lays out community function attendance, like if a student passes away and someone goes to attend on behalf of the school, that's considered community responsibility leave in there. And again, that's in the state manual. Our local manual also had leave available for some volunteer activities. And one of the things that we have brought to you is to clarify those activities a little more. As the manual existed at the time, there was leave for volunteer, community responsibility leave for volunteer activities, working with the 501c3 organization. Recently, we've had questions about, well, what if I'm going to read at a school in Wake County? And other questions about the Guardian Ad Litem program and things like that. And so we wanted to put some clarification in here. So we've added information about volunteer activities with the school system, with a Wake local government agency, a state government agency or state-created entity, or a 501c3 nonprofit. And we feel like that will hit many of the areas that we've had questions about recently, and also gives a little more flexibility to our employees about using these community days. We all get them, 2 of them every year, and I think because it's been so specific to 501c3, we've had questions about, what about election? You know, if I want to go work at the polls and things like that. So we really feel like this gives that flexibility now for our employees to understand that and use this leave for those purposes. And then, I'm saying I need to pull out my glasses, I'm not seeing as well now. There's, the leave form allows for the request for community responsibility leave like our other leave, and it's a 2-day leave that does not carry into the next year. You restart, you use it or lose it, essentially, for those 2 days. We also clarified in here information about jury duty and the responsibilities there, and information about court attendance and making it clear to our employee where if you're attending for official duties, for example, you've been asked to come in as a case manager or as a teacher who's been subpoenaed to come and address an issue, that's attendance for official duties, and that's something where the employee does receive salary for that attendance. But if you're going for a personal matter, then that's something where you would not be able to use this leave, but you could use other leave that you might have available for a personal matter. And then we included in here about elected officials and using this leave for those elected officials as well.
Any questions or comments?
I was asking my former teacher over here, but I never thought about this until, actually, it was Ms. Caulfield who brought up Guardian Ad Litem before, but then you just brought up going to a school to read. So how can they take this leave? Like, what if it really is, they're going to read, so that's only, let's just say, an hour and a half to 2 to drive there, get back and read?
So all of our leave right now is taken at a half-day increment. So even if they're going to the school, to read for part of that time, it would be a half-day increment for leave.
So they just might as well be going to other two.
Or, get a couple of schools or however, right.
I didn't know that. I mean, I really had, again, I run a nonprofit, you can take an hour, right? So that's, I guess that's helpful to know, because I'm thinking, a high school teacher could easily take their planning period and come read to our elementary schools, but not if they have a half day, they're not going to probably want to take it. But that's good for me to know, and I guess good for other people who are like me that didn't know that it has to be a half day.
And we run into that with our sick leave, our annual leave, and, you hear teachers all the time, well, if I'm going to be out, for an appointment for an hour, and I'm going to get docked essentially 4 hours,
Oh, interesting.
It's just the way our leave policies work.
And just as thank you, Sally, that the community leave for our teachers would be on days where kids wouldn't be there.
Right.
Obviously. But yes, that is a half-day leave there. But it's great. I love the fact that we were able to tell our employees before a lot of the read-alongs that happened this year. We were able to say, hey, you can do this and use community leave for that. And I had someone in my office who read at 2 schools and used a half a day. Yeah, it's great.
Tell them I said thank you.
I will.
It's nice to see so many central office folks out in the schools these past couple of weeks. Ms. Caulfield?
Yes, well, I can say on behalf of some of the teachers that inquired about this, they really appreciate you bringing it to the table. I have a question in reference to the guardian ad litem, and I hope I said that right because I cannot spit it out of my mouth correctly. Does that fall under the community function of court attendance?
So that's a great question, and we looked at that program specifically. So to the extent that someone in that program would be subpoenaed to come and present, then that would fall under the court attendance. To the extent that they're kind of going, if they're not subpoenaed, but they're going out on their own, they want to be able to be there or be present or that sort of thing, that could fall under the volunteer leave. But we would be limited to those 2 days. So if they're subpoenaed, they would go and do whatever work they would need to do would fall into court attendance. If they are going sort of on their own, not being required to be there. One of the things we put in here was state government agency or state-created entity. The Guardian Ad Litem program and the entity that runs it is a state-created entity, and that's specifically why we put that language in there.
Okay. And the 2 days that they get, is that 2 days a year no matter which category they're in, or 2 days for each category?
2 days total.
Total?
And under the Wake County volunteer activities, it's 2 days total.
Okay, so then I'm going to throw this out there, and I'm going to ask, I'm not sure how we could do this, but depending on the case and the teacher, I know that, some of these teachers talk to each other and, they go together and stuff. They could have anywhere from 3 or 4 times a year that they have to actually go to advocate for that child. I guess it could fit in either or. So depending on where the case is at and what is involved with that, they can go to advocate for that child several times. And if they have more than one case and more than one child that they're handling, that too may be one case that they do it for this and 2 cases for the other child. So I know it says 2 times a year. Is that something that Wake County can actually change to be per case basis, or with the exception, made by the principal? Because I'm thinking about the child. If you're going and you're advocating for that child, the child needs help, right? So to split that up and have them either, one, not have somebody advocate for them one time that they need to show up, or to have 2 separate people showing up to fill up the time that that child needs, it's kind of breaking it up, and then the teacher is now going to get penalized for time if they're sticking with that child. So, I'm sorry. No, I'm just saying, so to limit it to 2 days when that may not be an option for a particular child.
I guess and to add to that, my question is also, or is there another type of leave that an employee can pull from to make sure that that is covered.
Yeah.
Right?
I think their concern was that they were having to use their own personal time to help another child, so it may deter some teachers from doing that because they may need their personal time, either for their own children or their own purposes.
Right.
But in this policy here, it really helps them, but then it kind of could close the door at one point too, just because of that 2-day limit.
I believe the 2-day is local to us. I believe that's specific to Wake County with the 2 days.
I think that's right. I'm not immediately finding anything in the benefits and employment manual on that.
So then I would like to recommend that we change that.
Not 2 days at the state level?
It doesn't, the benefits manual doesn't.
I mean, even if we could say, as needed, case by
The administrative
case,
code
with
does
the
not, I don't see
principal
anything in
approval.
that.
I know they do.
I mean, you obviously don't want them out weeks at a time, you don't want them out a week at a time, but it seems like you're kind of advocating for the child, and then at one point, you're going to go before the court. So the consensus I got was it was 1 or 2 times per incident that per child. So I'm going to say if we could leave it with some kind of wording as needed, like case basis, or even adding with approval from the principal, just so that they are aware of what they need to fill in when that teacher is gone, so they have some kind of, guide. Okay, if the courts are telling you it's going to be 2 days for here and you need this day in April and that day in October, at least the principal's aware and signing off on it.
So I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, those are 2 days have dollar signs attached to them, so the more that we increase that, somebody's got to pay for those somewhere.
Tricia's back there like,
Yes, I just saw it.
I don't even know if you mentioned, you were like,
Yeah,
well, your face was like,
Which I understand, but I'm saying, how many times has it happened that we are going to worry about it on such a large scale for budget reasons versus why we're doing this? We're helping the children in our community.
So if I may.
Yeah.
So one of the things, again, is if you're talking about them being subpoenaed to court, then you don't get into this 2-day thing. So that's one thing.
Okay.
If they're subpoenaed to court, then that would fall under the section C here in the policy, attendance for official duty or attendance for a subpoena. So if they're subpoenaed to be there to represent that child, it would fall under that court attendance section, and it would not be a part of our volunteer activities. So that may meet that issue that you're discussing there with section C. I don't know how the guardian ad items are called into court, but it certainly seems that would be an opportunity if they're subpoenaed to come into court to represent. That's a potential way to do that. And then, again, if it's something where they're not subpoenaed, then that's where you're talking about the 2 days. And obviously, as I said, it's up to the board to decide if you all want it to be beyond 2 days, but there would be some implications to that. Or if you're talking about, for a particular type of program or activity, you want to permit it beyond 2 days, that would be something, that would be another consideration. So it's still 2 days for everybody except for this particular program. That's another option there. But again, if it's possible that it's going to fall under the court attendance requirement there as a subpoena person.
So the section C doesn't have a number of days. So that would help when they actually have to go to court, but if they're helping, say 2 or 3 children that year, they're still limited to 2 days. That means they could either pick a child or hope that each child only needs 1 day. So that's why I still think the limit.
But I think that's an important question, Ms. Caulfield, regarding, specific to guardian ad litems, but I also wonder if we need to get more research from staff on the program and what the commitments are.
yeah, because I have so many comments, because I have several staff who volunteer for them, and it's actually different if they're volunteering versus they're doing it in their role as an educator. They're not the same. So I do think you all should get the information and come back. And it is a very long
It
program.
could just be that we bring this back to policy committee to learn more, or if it's something where we think we can do this on action once we have that information, knowing that that's a direction that we're looking at going in, we can look at it that way as well. But I think what I'm hearing is we need a little bit more research and information specific to the Guardian Ad Litem program. Dr. Ng, you had a question or a comment specific to it?
It's a comment kind of tying this and the next one, but I'm just wondering whether other fellow teachers could be able to donate their civic leave to the person who's actually needing it, so that because Mr. Swanson said, it is tied to money, so I really don't want to have so many days of leave that are needed to be paid. But just a thought for our next topic discussion.
Mr. Swanson, you had a question or comment?
I don't really look it up, but these days are just associated with dollars. But yes, I remember what it is now. I'm just going back to when I was in the classroom and really didn't understand what the community days were. So this is a great layout for new teachers and just teachers in general, because I'm sure I lost a couple of these days, not really knowing what it was, but hopefully now those that are paying attention or maybe get a better understanding. And I'm sure you all send out information just to explain what these days are, so teachers do not lose these days or can utilize them as it sees fit in the policy.
Certainly something that we can let folks know once the policy goes through, of what those expanded opportunities are to use community leave.
Yes, thank you.
I don't know if there's a particular path that you all want where we could, if it is the idea of expanded community leave for the Guardian Ad Litem program, where there are potentially more days specifically for that program, or if you would like research into more of the specific types of days or the different people who might use the Guardian Ad Litem and how and when they can use it, or all of that.
I think we're looking really at all of it in the reverse order. And I think my suggestion would be that we put a pin on this particular one and not move it to action, so that we can have a more broad discussion regarding specific to the Guardian Ad Litem program and what that looks like for staff. Because I'll admit I don't know as much about it, and I know Ms. Johnson-Hausler knows way more than I do about it, but I think we can get more information on where it stands and what it is, and then what it looks like moving forward, so that we can have a policy that helps those folks that are volunteering their time to help kids that are in need of help during that.
Absolutely, we can do that.
So with that, we will move to 7540 voluntary shared, and I like that donated is pulled out in this leave.
So policy 7540 is one that's from the School Board Association manual. We put the donated in there because most people know it as donated leave, but it's officially voluntary shared leave. And we have basically just added some more details about the donated leave process, when people are able to donate the leave, what the application process looks like. We've made it clear that people aren't able to use any sort of encouragement or coercing anyone into donating leave to them or getting paid to receive leave or any of that. And we did not put in the details in the state board policy that talks about, if you're donating to a family member, you can donate this many number of days of this type of leave and this days of that sort of leave. We left that more at a general level, but referenced those requirements in here, making it clear that the amount of vacation or bonus or sick leave that can be donated or accepted is defined by the DPI benefits manual. Again, just clarifying that if If someone has donated leave and that leave is not used, then the undonated leave goes back to the employee. But again, this is just to share more information with our employees, hope they get a better understanding of how donated leave operates, consistent with what's in the BPI manual, some of what's in our handbook, and some in our existing policy 3800. To the extent that this policy is approved, thank you, Sally, it would replace sections 4.3 and 4.4 of our current policy manual.
Any comments on donated leave? Is there a motion?
Motion to move to first reading.
Second.
All right, motion by Mr. Hershey, and second from both Chair Haggerty and Mr. Swanson. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right. So upcoming for Policy Committee, and I'm going to look to Dr. Robinson to make sure I have this all correct. We're going to revisit the Crown Act, bringing forward the migration part of employee dress code. We'll relook at our dress code as well as 1710, which is discrimination, bullying, and harassment. And we will pull that into a broader discussion. Ms. Caulfield's going to let Dr. Robinson know the part that she's looking at for that. At some point, paid parental leave will be on the table as part of the migration. And we are going to revisit civic responsibility specific to guardian ad litems. I also want to say that Mr. Hershey and I have been talking about a sustainability policy, which will be coming in May. And so we've got a lot of work to do coming forward. But I think it's all good work and certainly what's best for our students and our staff. Mr. Hershey?
To add to.
What else you got?
And I just encourage people.
I should have known that if I referenced you, you're going to throw me a potential curveball.
I was coming anyways. At the end of the facilities meeting, we discussed, and this doesn't have to be in the immediate future, just gifts that we receive, large gifts, and should we have a policy around it? I just encourage everyone to
Like it's to a specific school.
Like what's in the
Community,
policy and the
yes.
criteria.
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
I think. So just
All right.
for those that didn't know at this table that came up, it came up in facilities. Well, I meant also staff. So that's it.
Okay. It seems like a statement. All right. Well, thank you all for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you in April.
Thank you very much.
All right.
you.
We are adjourned.
Good job.
4:34. We did that.
Go get on.